Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. We're cutting through the noise today, taking a stack of material and helping you get straight to the core insights quickly, maybe with a few surprising facts and, maybe a moment or two of unexpected connection along the way. Today we're doing something a little different. Instead of the usual articles or research, our sources are, well, excerpts from a novel. It was published over 100 years ago. H.G. Wells' The Secret Places of the Heart from 1922.
That's right. And it's fiction, sure, but these pages give us this really vivid picture of people navigating a world that felt like it was just fundamentally changing, reeling from the First World War. So it's a deep dive not just into the story itself, but into the ideas and the anxieties that were swirling around back then,
Right. So our mission today is to unpack the key struggles these characters face.
their internal conflict.
Yeah. Their views on society and how they see their personal problems, well, strangely tied to the big global challenges of the day.
It gives us this unique window into a specific moment in history when the old ways felt like they were crumbling. And this idea of a new age was coming up exciting, but also pretty daunting. And as we explore it, you might find some of these struggles feel, well, surprisingly familiar even now.
Absolutely. So let's unpack this,
Yeah.
starting with that sense of overwhelm, the exhaustion that really kicks everything off.
We meet Sir Richmond first. He's a prominent public figure, and he's just bone tired. And not just physically. There's this deep mental fatigue, moral fatigue, too. It's like the weight of the world is just sitting right on him.
And he connects that exhaustion, doesn't he, directly to the state of the world as he sees it in 1922. Everything's short: food, fuel, basic stuff. He sees this new public as wild, unpredictable, ready to smash up the show, he says.
Yeah, and there's strikes, there's Russia causing chaos in the distance, just this general feeling of breakdown, systems failing.
Exactly. He feels, what was the phrase, like a chicken you hatched in a thunderstorm. Just completely overwhelmed by his responsibilities. He talks about losing that old assurance, the certainty people seem to have before the war. That's gone.
Vanished. And his own explanation for this feeling is pretty straightforward, at first anyway. Fatigue. He thinks he's putting in too much effort, working on too high a level, trying to be too austere.
Right. He feels he strains and flags, and when that happens,
The lower stuff in one, he calls it, the subconscious stuff, it just takes control.
okay, and this is where Dr. Martineau enters the picture.
Yes, Dr. Martineau. He's a physician, and he's actually working on a book called Psychology of a New Age. And he sees Sir Richmond's fatigue not just as a personal issue, but as a kind of psychological symptom of this changing world.
Ah, okay. So it's bigger than just burnout.
He thinks so. He agrees the old system is breaking up,
Yeah.
and he believes science and like a deliberate plan have to replace custom and tradition. And fast, if civilization's gonna survive.
So the fatigue is almost a reaction to this massive shift happening all around him.
Precisely. It's a personal crisis, deeply, deeply intertwined with what feels like a global one.
That makes sense. And building on that idea, the subconscious stuff taking over, Martineau has some really interesting ideas about the inner self, almost mystical.
He does, yeah. He describes a person as a creature of the darkness with new lights. It's this powerful image, like we have these ancient, maybe primitive, unsubjugated powers deep inside us that can suddenly interfere with our conscious, rational selves.
The stuff that just pops out when you least expect it.
Right. And Martineau's approach is that understanding this is the first step. Diagnosis is the treatment, basically.
Yeah, analyze the mental knot, he says, and you can untie it.
But Sir Richmond, he's resistant at first, says he wants to forget himself, not, dig into all that darkness.
Which is pretty relatable, isn't it? Who really wants to look that closely inside?
Yeah.
But then, bam, something happens that forces him to confront it. His car breaks down, and it triggers this absolute fit of rage. Just loses it.
Okay, rage. So that's one of those ancient powers popping up, maybe? Martineau certainly seems to think so, or at least he sees it as a primitive impulse. He calls it one of nature's cruder expedients. Like, it's not some fundamental necessary force, it's basic.
He even talks about the devil nowadays, right?
Yeah.
The ancestral ape.
Exactly. Specifically the old male ape. That's the root of this kind of outburst, in his view.
Okay, the inner ape theory, I can sort of see that. But Sir Richmond sees rage very differently. Almost grander.
He really does. For him, it's blind driving force. It's something that puts rage in dead matter, making it alive, powerful stuff.
Wow.
He has this line, no rage, no go. He sees it as essential fuel.
And not just inner frustration, but
Rage against the universe, yeah.
yeah.
like a cosmic defiance.
That's fascinating. They see the same raw emotion, but through such different lenses.
Totally. Martineau, the scientific observer, sees this leftover primitive trait, the inner ape, acting out.
While Sir Richmond, the, overwhelmed public figure, feels it as this essential, maybe even necessary energy, a pushback against how damn difficult everything is.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it, between a scientific, maybe slightly detached understanding of our drives and the raw, lived experience of those drives.
And it makes you think about those moments yourself when you feel that intense frustration or anger. Is it just the inner ape needing discipline? Or is there something, I don't know, essential in that energy? Maybe your own little rage against the universe?
It's a really good question to sit with. And, well, from the weight of the world and this inner fatigue, the story then shifts quite dramatically.
Right, into his personal life, specifically his relationships with women.
And, yeah, this gets complicated fast. He talks about having this idealized dream of women when he was young, beautiful, kind, helpful.
Like a fantasy.
Exactly. But it was completely separate from the reality of the women he actually met. He admits he was never wholehearted and simple about sexual things.
And Martineau, with his scientific viewpoint, has this almost cynical take on desire itself.
Yeah, he questions its biological purpose, calls it nature's cheap sort of way of humbugging us into having kids.
Humbugging us.
Wow.
He suggests desire points towards these glowing satisfactions and illusions, not the actual messy business of offspring.
Nature's trick. That's a pretty harsh view.
Sir Richmond pushes back a little, though. He says for him, it's been more about craving life-giving companionship than just, raw desire.
Okay, companionship.
But Martineau, ever the pragmatist, still sees that companionship thing as just another device. Nature's way of keeping people together long enough for the unpremeditated offspring to happen.
He really reduces everything down, doesn't he?
It's this constant push and pull. Sir Richmond's subjective experience versus Martineau's, reductive scientific explanation.
And we see the real-world consequences of all this inner complexity in Sir Richmond's actual marriage. He married young to a woman who sounds, frankly, wonderful. Charming, intelligent, understanding, made a delightful home.
Sounds ideal on paper, yet just 4 years in, he was unfaithful.
And his reasoning is, well, it's telling. He felt this is not love. He was craving something else, something vaguely beautiful, he says. He knows it was shockingly unfair to his wife. He acknowledges that. But he felt driven by this need.
He describes his affairs as part of this fantastic thing I am, living this double life.
Responsible public figure on one hand.
Hidden love adventures on the other. And he finds these affairs, get this, unsatisfying and vitally necessary. Both at the same time.
That phrase just nails it, doesn't it? The internal contradiction.
It really does. He feels women make life for me. They convey loveliness, give him vision. Without them, he says he's just a hard, dry industry, a soulless rage.
And crucially, he believes he literally cannot go on without these affairs.
Wow. So what does Martineau make of all this?
Martineau's analysis is pretty blunt. He sees Sir Richmond as either abnormal or maybe excessive, and he calls his attitude amazing selfishness, basically reducing women to just contributors to his own needs and vision.
Ouch.
He also notes, maybe a bit wryly, his wife's incredible patience through it all.
Amazing selfishness. Yeah, ouch is right. And then there's a brief mention of one of these women, Martin Leeds.
Right. Sir Richmond calls her a thoroughly bad lot by conventional standards, but also one of the most honest and kind women he knew, which is quite a contrast.
And Martineau's reaction.
He just jots down in his notes, apologetics of a rake.
Huh. Okay. That just captures the dynamic perfectly, doesn't it? Sir Richmond rationalizing, Martineau labeling.
Exactly. It's a really complex look at how someone can be so dedicated in public life, but wrestling with these deeply personal, seemingly contradictory needs and desires.
Okay, so he's got the inner rage, the complex relationships, and on top of all that, he's buried in this massive public work project.
Right, the focus shifts back to that. His main public work is all about the world's fuel situation, and he sees it not just as a national issue, but something that affects the entire species, a global problem.
His big push is for, a permanent commission to handle fuel as one single global affair.
Yes. Which, you have to remember, for 1922, that sounds incredibly forward-thinking, really ahead of its time.
Definitely. But he's hitting roadblocks.
Oh, yeah. Immense resistance. He's up against selfish landowners, coal owners, what he calls stupid labor men.
That's frustrating.
Lawyers, Politicians who think like a game of cat's cradle, focused on these narrow, complicated procedures instead of the big picture. Plus, there's just massive waste everywhere, from how coal is owned to how it's mined, even down to wasteful fireplaces in homes.
And he doesn't hold back on his opinions of these people.
Not at all. He calls them suicidal imbeciles. Damned fools. He feels like he's basically single-handedly trying to shepherd the conscience of this entire committee.
Shepherd the conscience.
Good.
Wow. But then there's this interesting twist, right? Even with all this opposition.
Yes. This is key. He still believes there's a suppressed world conscience, like a creative undertow, this underlying drive towards the decent thing that exists even in the people fighting against him.
A hidden current of goodness, maybe.
Yeah.
Underneath all the selfishness.
And Martineau agrees with this. He says this idea marches very closely with my own ideas.
So they share this belief, this hope, that humanity fundamentally wants to do the right thing, even if self-interest and, just inertia get in the way all the time.
But Sir Richmond feels like he's the only one really pushing that current forward. He calls it an exhausting, inhuman job.
Yeah, you could feel the strain.
He feels like he's near breaking point, totally convinced that if he fails, the committee will just collapse into utter futility. Everything will be for nothing.
And this huge burden is made worse by this profound loneliness, especially spiritually.
Yeah, he can't find comfort in believing in a personal, friendly God. The most he can grasp onto is the sense that maybe righteousness rules, but it's not merciful, it's not personal, it's just some abstract force.
That must be incredibly isolating, carrying this massive burden for humanity, seeing this potential for the decent thing, but feeling utterly alone in the dark when you look for some kind of comfort or meaning.
It's a heavy, heavy cross to bear. But then the narrative takes a bit of a turn. It offers a different kind of connection.
They take a trip, right? To some ancient sites, Avebury, Stonehenge.
Exactly. Trying to get some historical perspective, maybe reset. Martineau points out Avebury's incredible age and how neglected it is. Sir Richmond is initially a bit underwhelmed by Stonehenge, actually, maybe expecting something grander.
And this is where they meet V.V. Miss Grammont, a young American woman.
Yes, V.V. And she has the spark. Wells describes her as having a genuine historical imagination. She doesn't just see old stones. She sees history as this tragic struggle that still goes on.
That's a powerful perspective.
She contrasts the typical American tourist sightseeing with a deeper understanding, a feeling of belonging to this long, ongoing story.
And she's on her own quest, isn't she? Looking for meaning after some personal trauma. Maybe linked to the war, a lost love.
Seems likely. She felt her personal life was spoilt and over, as she puts it, couldn't find solace in religion or traditional duty, and she had this moment of clarity, this revelation. Either I find out what all this world is about, or I perish. Intense.
Wow. So her historical pilgrimage is her way of figuring things out.
Her form of education, yeah. A way to forget self by getting hold of something bigger than her own pain.
She also had her own struggles with conventional expectations back home.
Definitely. Rejected a marriage to a man she disliked acutely, found him possessive, lacking fellowship.
And her father, rich American type.
Yeah, wants to push her into the business world, the fuel world, actually. Wants to make her a man financially, tie her up. She feels American women are often just petted, kept out of things, just spenders and wasters. She wants more.
So she's also wrestling with expectations, disappointment, and this deep need for purpose. Like Sir Richmond, in a way.
Exactly. And the connection between them, it sounds pretty immediate.
Yeah, it clicks.
It's like they're instantly on the same wavelength, talking about the world crisis, the need for this new age, this common purpose to build it, putting things in order for the common man, they call it. She feels she lacks a defined purpose. She's searching for meaningful work, and he represents that kind of work.
It's like they recognize that creative undertow in each other, that drive.
Precisely. They see the potential for a shared enterprise, a shared mission. And as they spend more time together exploring these ancient sites, this shared purpose starts to deepen, to become something more personal.
Which leads to the developing feelings between them, and eventually that moment of physical intimacy, the kiss at Tintern Abbey.
A very significant moment. And for Sir Richmond, it brings this startling realization. He feels he's head over heels in love with her. More deeply, more truly than ever before, he thinks.
But this isn't a simple romance novel ending. That intensity immediately triggers his internal conflict again, doesn't it?
Right back to it. He has this internal monologue. almost hearing the voice of Martin Leeds, maybe his conscience,
reminding him.
reminding him he's an extravagantly imperfect lover, that his love comes and goes like the wind, that he'll inevitably fail Vivi just as he feels he failed Martin. His work, his obligations, he knows deep down they will always take precedence.
This brings up his broader thoughts on perfect love, or rather, the lack of it.
Yeah, he sees it missing in himself and really in all of mankind. He calls humanity a fluctuating adolescent, lacking the courage and wisdom, he thinks, to love simply and directly. For him, love is always mixed up with greeds and jealousies and cowardice.
That's a pretty bleak assessment. Maybe understandable given his track record, though.
Definitely. And so, despite this powerful love they both feel, they make this incredibly difficult decision.
To part. Romantically, anyway.
Yes, and Vivi's reasoning here is crucial. She sees it so clearly. If they ran off together, Sir Richmond's life's work, his honor, everything he's striving for, gone. Poof.
And her own potential?
Her potential, too. Her chance to use her father's wealth, his connections, for this new age work they both believe in that would disappear, too.
She realizes their love, if they pursued it conventionally, would become too small.
Exactly. Just two people who have run away. Too focused on themselves. And she feels that intensity, that focus just on them, would somehow negatively affect her own quest for purpose, her own work.
So they decide to carry their connection forward, but differently, on what they call a higher plane.
Right. They consciously choose not to pursue ordinary lovemaking, believing it would somehow spoil everything, their shared aims, their work for the new age. It's just too important, too high in their minds.
So what's the plan? How do they stay connected on this higher plane?
They agree to part physically, but they'll stay connected through letters, focusing on political matters, their common interests, the work. Their love will be implicit, understood, but not acted upon in the usual way. They'll be working together, feeling each other's presence and purpose by serving the same large goal.
Wow.
And Vivi, she finds her mind beautifully clear and settled in this decision. It's framed around this idea that their individual self, their personal happiness, matters less than the work itself.
That's quite a choice. Prioritizing the shared intellectual societal mission over personal romantic fulfillment. It leaves Sir Richmond in a really complex state, I imagine.
Absolutely. He's left with feelings of loss, confusion. The time with Vivi feels disconnected as a dream, and there's this undercurrent of anger simmering, which he suppresses.
And his immediate action after parting from her is quite revealing.
It is. He decides to go straight to Martin Leeds' cottage in Cornwall. And he explicitly resolves to be kind to her, finally acknowledging how badly he's treated her in the past.
It's like this decision about Vivi, this sacrifice, forces him to confront his past behavior towards other women.
Perhaps. But despite this personal turmoil, or maybe fueled by it, he throws himself back into his public work with this renewed, almost desperate vigor.
Right back to the Fuel Committee?
He dominates it, driven by conviction, unleashing what Wells calls illuminating scorn on anyone focused on petty, selfish interests. He's pushing hard.
But this intense effort, piled on top of the fatigue he already had, it takes a physical toll, doesn't it?
A huge toll. He falls ill, just a cold at first, but he neglects it, becomes irritable, pushes himself, keeps working even with a fever, dictating things in a vast, angry whisper. And ultimately, he dies of pneumonia shortly after his majority report finally passes. He basically worked himself to death.
He got his win, but at the ultimate cost. He died for the decent thing.
Pretty much. And Dr. Martineau reflects on this death later. He learns about Sir Richmond's final days, the conference victory, his stay at Martin Leeds' cottage. He meets Sir Richmond's wife, Lady Hardy. She's grieving, naturally, but also struggling with how to capture his complex memory. She notes the portraits just don't get him right.
The complexity again?
And Lady Hardy is distressed to hear that Martin Leeds wants to visit, another layer of the unresolved messiness of his life.
And Martineau finds something in his study.
Yeah, he finds that photo of Vivi amongst Sir Richmond's papers left out recently. It suggests she was very much on his mind right at the end, though Martineau doesn't know how that affair, or non-affair, concluded.
And Sir Richmond's own deathbed thoughts. Were they profound?
Heartbreakingly simple, actually. He couldn't think of anything comforting or meaningful to say to his family or friends. He was just too tired. And he dreaded the whole ordeal of deathbed partings.
Just tired.
And this encounter with death, Sir Richmond's death, it triggers a profound existential crisis for Dr. Martineau himself. Sir Richmond's loneliness, his dread, it resonates deeply with Martineau. He suddenly confronts his own mortality, his own unfinished work, that Psychology of a New Age book.
He sees himself mirrored in Sir Richmond's fate.
He sees himself as every man walking this lonely path, knowing everything, all his work, all his connections will eventually be left behind. It's this overwhelming conviction, this stark realization that prompts him to call and confirm that Sir Richmond has, in fact, died.
A powerful moment for him. And the final scenes focus on Vivi's reaction, right?
Yes. She comes to the house. She's deeply distressed by the formal portraits, saying they miss the man she knew entirely. She views the body, noting his waxen, inexpressive dignity, and this phrase really sticks, his faint, inane smile.
Faint, inane smile. God, that's just heartbreakingly at odds with the complex, driven, tormented man we've been discussing.
Exactly. She reflects on how he never really seemed happy, how his work always came first, sacrificing his happiness and hers. Her grief is just raw, uncontrolled. She asks, "What shall I do now? Who shall I laugh with?"
Oh, man.
Before completely losing it, weaving and beating on the coffin, desperately wanting him to speak, to connect one last time.
It's just this desperate, primal response to loss. And Martineau's final thought.
Witnessing her grief, his final observation is chilling. He thinks he feared love for the cruel thing it is, the dreadful liability.
Wow. A stark closing thought on the cost, the pain, wrapped up in deep connection.
He really is.
So what does this whole deep dive into Wells' novel really offer us today? We've seen these characters wrestling with global chaos, personal exhaustion, the sheer messiness of love and relationships, and that relentless pressure of trying to push the world towards something better, something decent.
Yeah, it really shows how even when the external world feels like it's completely breaking down, our internal landscape, our drives, our search for purpose, our relationships, that remains absolutely central to our struggle.
And that intense conflict we saw between the desire for personal connection, for love, and the pull of a larger purpose, that shared task for humanity. So Richmond and Vivi, they find this incredibly powerful connection, this shared vision, but ultimately they choose to prioritize the mission, framing their love on that higher plane.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? In a world overflowing with information, distractions, constant crises, where do we find meaning? Is it solely in chasing personal happiness, or is there a deeper meaning found in connecting with others through a shared vision, working for something bigger than just ourselves?
Sir Richmond's story ends in exhaustion. He's literally consumed by his fight for the decent thing. And those left behind, they're grappling with his legacy and also with the fundamental difficulty of ever truly knowing another person, even someone you love profoundly.
Yeah, it leaves us contemplating the ultimate cost of that kind of dedication, the elusive nature of happiness, and whether pursuing a greater purpose inherently requires sacrificing personal fulfillment. Is that the trade-off?
So why should you care about this story from 1922? Well, because that feeling of living through uncertain times, systems breaking down, wrestling with your own inner chaos, searching for something meaningful to dedicate yourself to.
That's not unique to the post-WWI era, is it? That feels incredibly relevant right now.
Absolutely.
It challenges us to look inward. What's really driving you? Is it that raw instinct, that rage Martineau talked about? Is it a pull for personal satisfaction? Or is it maybe that subtle creative undertow, that quiet pull towards a better world that Sir Richmond, despite everything, seemed to believe in?
Right. And if it is that pull towards a better world, what's the real cost? Not just to you, but to the people around you, the people who care about you.
And that, I think, raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. How do you navigate that balance between your personal life, your desires, your needs, and your sense of responsibility to the wider world around you?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you something to chew on and perhaps some new ways to look at the struggles we all face then and now.